awesome. So my name is Fay Cammayo, and for those of you that don't know me, one of the first things I tell people about myself is that I'm a debater. Back in high school, my biggest regret was not joining the debate team. So when I got to college, one of the first things I did was I signed up. And it was definitely one of the best decisions I have ever made in my entire life. In 2 years of debate, I learned more about myself and the world around me than 4 years at an institution like NYU will ever teach me. I remember last year at a tournament, my coach made my debate partner and I watch one of the top teams in the nation debate in their quarterfinal round. And this team, made up of a girl named Nicole and a guy named Matt, what they did is they ran an anti-blackness argument in a style called performance. And these are all fancy debate terms to say that the woman, Nicole, rapped a slam poem called Hands Up, Don't Shoot. And Nicole, in her poem, she spoke about what it meant to be an African-American woman living in the United States. She spoke about how hard it was to be targeted because of the color of your skin by institutions that are supposedly designed to protect you. And she argued for a methodology called Hands Up, Don't Shoot. And what that meant to her was that when you say hands up, don't shoot, we redirect our attention to who is holding the gun. So what we would do as a society is to turn our gaze away from the black body and to look at who's holding the gun and to analyze critically what it is they're doing. Why are they targeting these people? So at the end of her speech, my partner and I had the same look as some people in the crowd were thinking, what the fuck do you say to that? So, with the benefit of hindsight, I was able to look back and see that I was asking the wrong questions. I should not have been asking, what do I say as a debater to her argument? I should have been asking, what do I as a person, particularly a person of color, do about police brutality and institutionalized racism in the United States? Because in the end, that's what debate is about. Debate is about identifying problems in our society and coming up with solutions to it. So I decided to look into police brutality. I asked, where does it come from? And obviously it has a very long history that goes all the way back to slavery and continues today with ingrained racism in our society. But I found that there are many institutionalized reasons as to why police brutality and institutionalized racism exists. Did you know that the war on drugs is racist? More people are in jail for possession of marijuana than any other drug. And marijuana is so important because it was used to target lower income communities where usage rates were the highest because those communities were predominantly African American. Today, there are more than half the number of people in jail are in there because of drug-related charges. And non-violent drug offenses went from 50,000 to over 400,000 in a period of less than 20 years under the Reagan administration. And the worst part of the anti-drug hysteria was mandatory minimums. And what mandatory minimums are minimum numbers of years punished for offenses. And you get a minimum number of years regardless of the circumstance of your crime. So there are people in jail today for trafficking as little as 1 ounce of cocaine or marijuana, while in the US, a child rapist will only get 10 to 12 years. That means in the US, you are better off being a serial child rapist than a drug trafficker. And that's pretty messed up. And the worst part about mandatory minimums is that they disproportionately affect African Americans and Hispanics. In 2010, 74.4% of all inmates suffering under mandatory minimums were Black or Hispanic. And that's an issue in the United States because violent crime rates have not decreased. They've remained stable. That means that drugs supposedly, deterring drugs supposedly decrease violent crimes because drugs lead to violent crimes, but that is obviously not the case. We are incarcerating people at a ridiculous rate and violent crimes still persist. And before I go on to my next point, I'd like to thank you all for volunteering because we're going to play a little game of true and false. So I need hands, otherwise none of you are getting pizza. So first is 1 in every 1,000 US adults is in jail. Come on, I need hands. I'm going to start randomly calling people. Yes, you.
Yes.
It's false.
I think it's more. That's what I would do.
Oh, then you're absolutely right. It is 1 in every 100 adults in the United States. Good job. Next. The only country in the world today with more prisoners than the US is China. Someone else? Come on. How about you? Yes. False. You're 100% right. The US has nearly twice as many prisoners as China. And finally, African American males are 6 times more likely to be arrested than white males. Any takers?
True.
Yes, you cheater because you know the answer. It is true, unfortunately. In the US, we have over 2.3 million people in jail today. That's 25% of the total world prison population, despite the fact that the US only hosts 5% of the global population. And that brings me to my next point, which is the prison industrial complex. It is defined as the overlapping interests of government and industry to use policing, surveillance, and incarceration as solutions to what are in actuality racial, economic, and social problems. And what this does, it allows people to gain power through racial, economic, and structural privileges. And I know this all sounds like some crazy conspiracy theory, but it has real-life consequences. According to the Human Rights Watch, between the years of 1986 and 2003, the rate of incarceration for Black adult males in the United States was 256.2 for every 100,000 adults. For their white counterpart, it was only 25.6 for every 100,000 adults. That means we're incarcerating African Americans at over 10 times the rate, and what's even worse is that white population is 6 times greater than the African American population. That means, and studies have suggested that whites and blacks use illicit drugs at roughly the same rates. That means we have way more white people out in society that are using drugs than African Americans, and yet African Americans make up over half of the number of people in prison in the US. And my last and final point is police militarization. And what this does for police brutality. So police militarization started with the National Defense Authorization Act of 1997, also known as Program 1033. And what this program does, it is a federal program that redistributes excess military equipment to local law enforcement agencies for the sake of countering terrorism and drugs. And over $5.4 billion in excess military equipment has been redistributed since this legislation passed. And more than 8,000 local law enforcement agencies participated, and has led to an over 1,000% increase in the use of SWAT team raids. And why this is important is because the increase in SWAT team raids has also led to an increase in civilian deaths in the United States. There is a case of a woman named Tarika Wilson, who was a mother, who was gunned down in her own home during a SWAT team raid for a drug search warrant that was actually for her boyfriend. And her boyfriend wasn't even home at the time. And when they found her boyfriend, he only had 1 ounce of marijuana on him. And this mother was only 26 years old. And it's an absolutely tragic story that is not unique in the United States. So what does this mean today? All of this means that, in the end, the US has legitimate means for perpetuating a system of institutionalized racism that's targeting and violently oppressing Black minorities in the United States. And it sounds depressing, but the reason that I'm saying this and the reason that I'm here is because I, one, want to raise awareness about a problem that people probably don't think about every day. But more importantly, I want to share a personal story that I learned from debate, and it was one of the most valuable lessons I've ever learned in my life. And it is the importance of talking about issues, and the importance of talking about these issues that we don't want to think about. And I mean, sure, we're all, intellectuals, we go to NYU, blah, blah, blah. We know about Trayvon Martin and Mike Brown and the Black Lives Matter movement. But there are hundreds and hundreds of stories that we don't know about, that we don't hear about, and we don't listen to. There is a man, Erwin Leon Edwards, who was tasered to death in a jail cell after being arrested for having saggy pants. And Camila Brock was an African-American woman who was arrested and sent to a psych ward for trying to pick up her BMW. The cops couldn't believe that a Black woman from Harlem could own a BMW, so they sent her to psych ward for over a week against her own will. And these stories, they unfortunately happen every day. And what I want to say is that we need to talk about them. We need to bring them to the forefront, because the longer that we refuse to speak about these problems, the longer that they will continue to persist. And that's the real problem. So what I challenge everyone, including myself, to do is to open your eyes, take a look around at the world, and think about it a little bit more critically than you did before. Thank you.